Welcome to Thoughts on Thursday. It's Reverend Miller.
And Stuart Holmes.
So we're in the season of Lent, and last week we said that the next two Thoughts on Thursdays, we would interview each other so that everyone out there would get a better perspective of Stuart's calling and his life as an organist and musician in the church, and then my calling and my life in the church as a minister. And the reason we're picking this kind of topic for Lent is that Lent originally started out as a season for new Christians to come into the church. And all of the season of Lent, they would be studying and preparing themselves for baptism and communion. And then on the Easter Vigil, the Saturday night of Easter, they would be brought into the church, be baptized, and have First Communion. And in fact, there's a lot of writings that say in the early church that you couldn't come to a Christian church until you went through this process. You had to be a Christian and understand what it was all about before you were worshiping with the Christian body. And so that's really this idea of being called and developing that call in your life. And many people, as Christians, are what you would call a lay Christian. You know, they're elders and deacons, but they don't become ministers or are paid by the church. And so Stuart and I happen to be paid by the church, and we've had a call in our lives that have brought us here. So what I'm going to do today is interview or grill, not roast, grill Stuart on how did he come to be the music director, music minister, organist here at Old Paramus Reformed Church. So we're going to move over and get
Change
into
glasses, new set. And we'll see how that works.
I'm in. All right.
Here we are.
So my first question to Stuart, because I think we're all dying to know this. Were you born and you came right to the organ? Like, boom, this is what happened?
Yeah, my earliest recollection is I was probably in 7th grade, and in my home church, my mother was, who's a soprano soloist, was talking to the organist, and I just walked up to the organ, and I can remember trying to get it to play, and I pushed buttons and everything, and I finally said, "Mr. Vogel, how do you get this thing louder?" That was my first experience.
First.
Yeah, I've always been intrigued.
So you were in church, you saw this organist, and you're like, I want to be a cool guy like this organist.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly it. And then when I was in the high school, we had an organist that in chapel. We had chapel every morning or every Wednesday. I don't remember. This guy was awful. He was awful, but I was probably awful worse.
Okay.
Worse awful. But I said I could play better than that, and then I started to practice and finally played for.
Did you start with the piano then before
Yes.
the organ? So you
I
had
had-
piano lessons.
I had.
Did you choose those piano lessons, or was it just that your family, you're going to take piano and?
Yeah, I think it was probably a little bit of both. Certainly at the beginning, I wanted to play, and then I gave it up probably as a freshman.
The piano,
The
and
piano.
you were now focused.
No, I wasn't focused.
On the organ,
I had
but-
just started
Okay.
at the. I mean, I'd had that piece.
Okay.
But no.
All right.
I was keyboard-less.
You were keyboardless.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Who were some of the teachers or mentors along the way that helped you?
Oh, that
And
was, that's the interesting part. When I was a senior, I had played a couple times in the chapel service
Okay.
at school, and my mother went to back to Mr. Vogel, Howard, and asked if I could take lessons. And he looked and he said, "You don't have enough piano experience." And I was playing, I was probably at fourth or fifth grade piano, which isn't, too bad, but he wouldn't teach me. So I went to another church in Summit. And
Okay.
he took me on. And then in college, my professor at Millikan was just wonderful and took me in. Interestingly enough, at the end of my freshman year, he sat me down. He was also my advisor, Ken LaRoe, and he said, "Stuart, I don't think you're going to make a full-time musician in a church." He was rather blunt about it, very nice, nice blunt, but I switched over to music education and kept the organ as a primary.
I mean, did that hurt when he said that, or did you sense it? I mean, what were...
I don't remember being hurt by it. I do remember that being able to keep the organ as a primary instrument was going to be important. Ken LaRoe became very important in my life, not only as an advisor, but in my senior year, I had to move out of the dorm. And he and his wife, Marion, took over, invited me to be in their house.
Oh.
So I lived with Ken and Marion.
Okay.
Then went back to Summit after I graduated and took lessons from Howard Vogel.
Okay.
So Ken LaRoe and Howard Vogel were the two.
So you were ready for
I was
Vogel.
ready for him.
Okay. And how was that, I mean, when you came back and now you're taking lessons from Howard Vogel, right?
Right.
What was that?
I mean, that kind of came full circle. At that point, I'd had my first job in North Plainfield, and
As an organist?
as an organist, right?
Were you organist / choir director or just primary
Yeah.
organ? Okay,
I was
so you did
both. And I taught music in Summit,
Okay.
elementary music in Summit at the same time. That was the bread and butter.
So your undergraduate is a certification in teaching music?
Right.
Okay. And then,
And then the organ was kind of the secondary.
okay.
That's kind of switched now. Yeah, you know, but that's
So
my
you kind of
background.
answered the question. I mean, along the way, what has been some trials or pitfalls that have, I mean, I would assume you went to Millikan thinking you were going to be a full-time church musician, or you weren't sure. You just knew organ became a
The
passion.
truth of it is, I didn't know what I was going to
Okay.
do. When I was in a senior in high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I loved this instrument,
Mm-hmm.
but I had no real goal, and that kind of just morphed itself. You know, the reality is, in order to be a full-time musician in the church, still today, you have to be immensely talented.
Yeah.
And looking back on it now, he was right.
Yeah.
And I think I came to that realization pretty quickly.
Okay.
You know, they were all right that I wasn't going to go on tour
Okay.
playing recitals.
Well, and I imagine when it comes to using talent, right? There, in sports or musicians, along the way, you get weeded out, so to speak, to the best. Each level is the, you know, I'm, you know, I didn't make it to the NBA as a basketball player, and
But you could shoot a basket.
well, barely. But I mean,
Yeah.
but
You
you
know-
still, I mean, that's the interesting part is that what year did he tell you you weren't going to be a full-time musician?
It would have been 69,
69.
early in 69.
2 years before I was born, and
Oh, thanks.
there you go.
Oh.
But you've had 52 years
Yeah.
of being a musician in the church, so to speak, 50-ish
Right.
years, and it's been good, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the interesting thing. It just wasn't full-time.
I have fallen into the right place at the right time
Yeah.
in my career.
Okay.
My first church, a small struggling choir with an organ that was in the balcony, but the choir was in the front. And
Yeah.
that was my first rebuild organ project.
Okay.
Moved the organ down to the front, added to it, and then the choir, I had probably 25 people in my choir at that point.
Hmm.
Going up from 8 or 9 when I
Okay.
started. then I went to, I'm going to get into my career. I went into, I was hired by the Chatham Methodist Church,
Okay.
who had a wonderful director of music, but things just weren't going well. And so I came in as an associate choir director in charge of one of the choirs, one of the two choirs.
So this is a big church, big choir
It was a
program.
bigger, it was a much bigger program, and still today it's a pretty prestigious. Well, I guess my wife would have called it a white steeple church.
Okay.
But I did not stay there long because I knew in order to do that program correctly, I'd have to almost be full-time.
Okay.
So I was there for 3 years. I helped them through a transition. There was, there was a little bit of infighting at that point, and we survived that. And then they went to hire Mark Miller, who was a pillar in the Methodist Church and at Drew University. So I was very pleased to be able to help them work toward that point, and that's when I was hired here.
Oh, okay. And so, I mean, speaking of your career, you find out you're not going to be a full-time church musician. You'll go to education, music education. So besides being here, what was the other, because it wasn't just teaching music, you've done a few things along the way.
Well, I had a stretch in the business world. I was the fourth generation to go into my family business.
And that business was?
It was a real estate, insurance, and property management.
Okay.
The property I was in there for 12 years, was the heir apparent. I would have been the fourth generation. But I clearly my heart was here.
Okay.
As church music, not as a manager of very high-powered, very successful salespeople. The property management business is what finally did me in.
Okay.
We had probably 400 units that we were managing, and that's not an easy job.
Okay.
So.
And you didn't feel called?
And I went to I went to one of my former principals, who has been a family friend for a long time, and asked him about getting back into teaching. And he's the one that kind of shepherded me through teaching. I had to do student teaching twice.
Okay.
In order to get ready, and then I was hired in Ridgewood.
And so you were at Ridge Elementary School, and you were teaching music.
5th grade.
5th grade, so it wasn't even music.
Not music.
Okay.
No. I didn't want to go back into the class or into music because of the I wanted the stability of the class.
Okay. So how many years of 5th graders know you as Mr. Holmes and have no idea you're a musician probably?
A lot. I was there from 88, September of 88, and I retired in June of 2015.
And now you're doing some substitute teaching, and you're doing even some of your favorite gym teaching.
Yeah, I'm going back to teach. I try for 3 days a week, only in the building that I was in.
Okay.
Because I know the principals
Yeah.
and the teachers.
And you know the place.
And I know the kids.
So, 2 more questions. So what year did you come here? 90?
I came here in 93.
93. Oh wow, so we're coming on to an anniversary next year. So 30 years coming.
Yeah.
Over the 30 years, what were some of your favorite, like preludes or postludes or anthems that you directed, or even a whole service you put together that really stand out to you now?
You know, I kind of figured that would be one of the questions you asked, and I'm coming up blank. There are so many things. Being able to have this choir with the soloists helping, with a quartet of
Okay.
professionals helping, Probably every year there are 2 or 3 anthems that really strike a chord with me, no pun intended. I think this baby here.
It just dawned on me, I asked the wrong question.
Yeah, this baby here was.
You were able to help build this organ.
Yeah, we had a clunker of an organ. And the console was wearing out. And I suspect, unlike my predecessors, I didn't hide the fact that it was breaking down.
Okay.
And I didn't try to, to cover up. I can't use that stop because it doesn't work. It was a long process. The contract was signed in '96 with Larry Nevin. It was going to be a rebuild at that point. It morphed into almost a completely new instrument using some of the old pipe work. And that was dedicated in 2000. 2000, there was still some work to be done. 2001 is when it was finished.
That's your highlight, this organ.
I would say that is probably, I loved helping Larry build it. He became
Did you learn some more about the organ during that process?
I'd always been interested in how a pipe organ works. Even in college, I took a course on construction.
Oh, all right.
But I was able to get my hands dirty doing this.
Well, before you cough to death, one last question. What are your hopes for church music in general, and maybe more specifically here at Old Paramus?
Church music is going through quite a change. People like me who aren't of the caliber to go full-time, but have an undergraduate degree, don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Who's going to pay $40,000, $50,000 to go to college and not do this full-time?
Would you say, too, 30, 40 years ago, there were probably people sitting in the church who knew how to play the organ?
Right.
Not professional, but they knew how, just like we have Pat who plays the piano.
Right.
She's a very good pianist, but she's not paid full time for that or even part time.
Right.
But you would have had someone in the congregation who probably could jump on the organ and play it. And you don't.
That's true. And the other thing that's happened is pianos aren't in
We had
every
an
house.
organ in our house. I don't know why, but my mom must have wanted to play the organ.
We don't have pianos in the houses anymore.
Yeah.
The kids are, the focus of growing up has changed dramatically with the coming of internet. First TV and then internet. I fear that
Lack of skill will be a problem.
Right.
Okay.
It is a problem, and I am, out of everything else, I am just passionate about bringing young people into the fold.
Okay. And one of the things you guys done with the AGO,
Right.
is I forget the name of it.
American Guild of Organists.
But what's your little kit?
Oh, we have a little tiny portative pipe organ. It's 2 octaves, 24 pipes, and it's all mechanical, so you can see what happens when you push down the key, and it sounds. So we bring it into churches and let the kids build it.
Yeah.
That's why it was constructed, or its purpose.
So your hope is people will love this instrument the way you love it, and it'll continue to be a part of bringing people's faith to a new level. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with the church, so many churches going to what I would classify as popular music, it's a struggle to bring to the congregation what these famous composers, Bach, Mendelssohn, Franck, did for church music. And I think Old Paramus is a little bit unique in that, for it being a smaller church with an organist that's somewhat versed in that. You know, that doesn't happen a lot
Yeah.
anymore. So
Well, thank you for allowing me
Wow.
to grill you. And
that was a lot.
I had to be kind because he's going to interview me next week. So I knew if I.
Yeah.
So the gloves will be off for Stuart next week because I'm not interviewing him after
We're
that,
going to
so.
change positions.
We'll see. So thanks for joining us. Hopefully that's just, you hear us talking. Stuart was kind of like, what questions will I ask you, since I share stuff within my sermon, but there's stuff we don't know. And this brings, you have to have a certain passion, a certain call to continue to do this ministry.
Yeah.
And hopefully you saw that, and we hope to see you on Sunday, either on YouTube or Facebook, or here in person, 10 a.m. for the last Sunday of Lent, and next Sunday after that will be Palm Sunday.
Already.
You ready for that?
Oh man,
So
it's coming.
Thanks, and we'll see you. I don't think Stuart's going to play us off, but I'll turn us off right now.